Hello and welcome to Taliesin's map, Deity chart Mythstreams. And today we have a deity who is not exactly on the deity chart, but is a very important deity nonetheless. So this is the Vedic goddess named Danu. And I've touched on this a bit in some other streams. For example, in the Dagda topic, in the Dagda myth stream, and elsewhere, some of this material will be overlapping, partially repeating or building on what has been said there. Because I am building the case, I'm putting forward the case that the Morrigan is the goddess who is the equivalent of the Vedic Danu. And so this is also one of the reasons why she wasn't on the deity chart itself. It's sort of been a bit of a puzzle, a bit of an ongoing project to really understand this parallel. So it wasn't included yet in the chart. Some of it is a bit difficult or open-ended, but nonetheless, I think there's a lot here, especially over as I've researched more recently. It seems to be a strong case that the Morrigan is the best parallel. Her best parallel, rather, is the Vedic goddess named Danu. Okay, so to sort of begin to understand what we're bringing together here, what type of goddess this is, and what we're talking about. First, I think I'll touch on a brief mention of who this goddess Danu is in Vedic context. So, Arthur Anthony McDonald, one of my favorite reference books for Vedic material, he says, quote, "Vritra's mother is called Danu and is compared with a cow in Rig Veda 1.32.9. Okay, so right there we have the fact that she is Vritra's mother, Vritra being the obstructing serpent, the water obstructing monster that Indra slays, of course. And Danu is this sort of mysterious goddess who is his mother. And it also tells us that she is there in the Rig Veda itself. Okay, she's not just a later figure, but she's there in the Rig Veda itself. But she's rather minor or kind of mysterious. She's not like a very prominent goddess who is worshipped in the Vedic hymns. But MacDonald goes on. This name seems to be identified with the word Danu. Of course, it's the same word, or identical with the word Danu, he says, which is several times used as a neuter meaning stream, and once as a feminine to designate the waters of heaven. Okay, so that tells us this word Danu, it's just a word that means stream or waters, right? It in the Rig Veda, the word apa or apas is the word usually most commonly used to designate just the generic waters, right? In different places. There are hymns, for example, in the 10th book, a hymn to the waters, the apas. But we also have this word Danu that appears as a sort of synonym of the apas to designate stream or waters of heaven. The same term is applied as a masculine, apparently in the sense of a metronymic to Vritra or the dragon, as well as to the demon Arnavaba and to 7 demons slain by Indra. The regular metronymic Danava is used 5 times to designate a demon combated by Indra and doubtless identical with Vritra. Indra casts down the wiles of the wily Danava. He struck down the snorting Danava to release the waters. Okay, so that is MacDonald. And so that last part tells us that Danu, her name becomes a metronymic, but in any case, it is it is like the children of Danu, therefore the Danavas, right? She is the mother of the Danavas because her name is Danu. And Vritra is one of these Danavas, right? And then elsewhere in other texts, later texts, these Danavas get fleshed out more with the specific names of who the Danavas are and all of that. So first and foremost, as we can see, they include the serpent, the primary serpent. So Danu is the mother of the serpent, and the Danavas become these semi-demonic or what have you. They are essentially among the Asuras. They get kind of lumped together with Asuras in depending on the text and that sort of thing, right? Okay, so they're these creatures of darkness, creatures of the abyssal waters, and all of that. So if you look at Danu in, if you just find Danu in Wikipedia, it says she is mentioned in the Rig Veda to be the mother of the eponymous race known as the Danavas. The word Danu described the primeval waters that this deity perhaps embodied. In later Hinduism, she is described as the daughter of the Prajapati Daksha. So this, whether or not that was her original parentage, she becomes considered as the daughter of Daksha and the consort of the sage Kashyapa. Okay, so that is all important. Okay, as a word for rain or liquid, Danu is comparable to the Avestan Danu, meaning river, and further to river names like Don, Danube, Dnieper, Dniester, etc. There's also a Danu river in Nepal. Okay, so this word Danu, it's related to this extremely well-known Indo-European word that appears over and over in river names and other body of water names, but primarily rivers, as we see, okay, across Europe and across the whole range of the Indo-European world, as we can see. And so we will touch back on that point, but just keep that in mind. It is this well-known and it's far-reaching word Danu that is there across into Europe and used continuously to designate this sort of thing. So because she seems to be the embodiment of the waters and even these primeval waters, perhaps, and she's sort of dark, mysterious figure who births the prominent demonic serpent Vritra, the antagonist serpent, you could say, among many other children. So, okay, here's actually a list from the Padma Purana to give an idea of who all of her children are. It says, from Kashyapa, Danu obtained 100 sons, proud of boons. Among them, Viprachiti of great power was the chief. Others were Dvirastamurdha, Shakuni, Shanku Shirodha, Ayomukha Shambhara. So Shambhara is another figure that is defeated by Indra in the Rig Veda. And we have Kapila Vamana, Marichi. So Marichi is another well-known figure. Magadha and Hari. Gajasiras, Yudharahara, Ketu, another well-known figure. Okay, let's see. There's a couple others. Taraka. Taraka is I believe a demon who is also well-known. Puloman, etc., etc. Okay, these and others were also Danu's sons, and that is from Padma Purana, Book 1, Chapter 6. So the point is, she has many, many children, and many of them are well-known demonic figures or semi-demonic antagonistic figures, all with Vritra essentially as the most well-known, the serpent. So she's this mother of the Danavas. I mean, the name Danavas gets treated as this semi-demonic race, essentially. It says a legendary race of Asuras. So they get, like I said, essentially classified as Asuras. All right. So this takes me to, I'm going to share my screen. So this takes me to considering that Danu is like a Tiamat type of figure, okay? And this would be sort of, I think, helps to, obviously the main parallel is not to Mesopotamian material, but Tiamat is a well-known image of this, I think, this same deity type, which is the mother deity who embodies the entire primordial waters, which is like the primordial sea in a sense, and secondly, is the mother of serpents and other terrifying, terrible, demonic kinds of figures. And yeah, like I said, even MacDonald pointed out how he said the same term, which is Danu, is applied as a masculine, apparently in the sense of a metronymic to Vritra, or the dragon, as well as to the demon Anubhava. Okay, so I guess I'm just saying that the name Danu, it blends together with sort of the main serpent. Tiamat is this, has serpentine associations. But more specifically, we have the fact that, of course, she is identified essentially with the sea, the deep abyss. But then she who bore them all, she's the mother. And let's see where. These were her offspring, okay, right? We just went through the offspring of Vedic Danu. These are Tiamat's offspring. So Basmu, meaning venomous snake. So her first famous offspring is venomous snake. Then Usumgalu, great dragon. Musmahu, exalted serpent. Ma Shusu, furious snake. Lamu, the hairy one. The big weather beast. Madhound. Scorpion man, violent storms, fish man, bull man. All right. So it's a similar thing, right? The mother of the serpents, of the serpents, while herself being the embodiment of the dark waters. Okay. And thirdly, she of course is herself like on the wrong side of the gods of order. She is embodying kind of, a force of chaos in a sense, or darkness, that has to be defeated in order for the world to be brought into order, right? Tiamat has to herself be defeated by Marduk, or by, there's other versions with different gods. It says here Enlil is another one. So there's different variations on the of course Tiamat battle story. But yeah, you can see that is similar to Danu and her monstrous offspring, the Asuras, being the ones that have to get battled by the good gods of order. And key, I think, for our Celtic parallel to the Morrigan is the fact that Tiamat herself, in her sort of monstrous primordial form, when she has to be defeated, she is there the spouse of Apsu, the dark abyssal male god, Apsu. She's essentially the spouse of Apsu, ABZU, right? And yeah, so they are like the primordial ocean and the dark abyss, male and female together, and she's appearing there as some kind of creature here. A belly, udders, ribs, neck. So obviously there are cow connections, cow symbolism, but also serpent, right? You see cow, she's like cow/serpent connotations. Like I said, the one main mention of Danu in the Rig Veda is that she's compared to a cow in Rig Veda 1.32.9. Okay. But then, of course, serpents come from her, so she has that connection as well. And then so from there, the important fact there is that when she's defeated in whatever version, one of the most famous details is that the wind is the power harnessed or used by the god, the hero god who defeats her, to be able to defeat this great mother deity monster who is there with the abyssal male counterpart. The wind is what is used. He fought Tiamat with the arrows of the winds. That is Marduk, right? So Marduk fought Tiamat with the arrows of the winds, a net, a club, and an invincible spear. Okay, so that's actually the version with Anu, I guess. Okay, so different gods take that role over, but in all cases, they use the wind. Here's the version, I guess, with, well, I'm not sure what version that is on Wikipedia there. It seems to be the Marduk version. He made the north wind bear it away into secret places. The skull that he, with his merciless club, this is very interesting in terms of the Irish parallel. With his merciless club, he smashed her skull. He cut through the channels of her blood, and he made the north wind bear it away into secret places. Okay, and then essentially, her body gets turned into. She kind of in herself is the primordial unity and totality. Even though she's like the abyssal water, she also is continuous with the earth that is created, because she gets kind of cut in half and becomes that earth sky, or like the substrate or the the foundation that becomes the earth and sky in some way. And that's a bit complicated, but yeah, she basically gets cut in half in the sort of earth sky division at the end when she's defeated. So that's a slight difference from Indo-European material, but you can see the continuity. Okay, so if you just keep this in mind, with his merciless club, he smashed her skull. He cut through the channels of her blood, and he made the north wind bear it away into secret places. From there, of course, we can look at the Din Shenahas of Moy Merthevnia, and this will be quite similar to that story of the defeat of Tiamat, using the wind specifically, and also a club that like the mace of Marduk that was just touched on there. Let me find this. Here we go. All right, so again, I went through this in the Daga stream, but this is the crucial text for this particular comparison. Moy Merthevnia, and it says, Moy Merthevnia, whence the name, not hard to say. The sea covered it 30 years after the flood, and hence it is called Merthevnia, that is, darkness of the sea. Okay, so Mer is sea, and Thevnia or Hevnia is darkness. And so essentially it can mean darkness of the sea, or it could be just implying dark sea, dark ocean, I believe. Darkness of the sea might be like a poetic kind of way to phrase it. But in any case, dark and sea are the two parts of the name. So essentially, it is like the dark sea. I've argued that this is equivalent to the dark ocean of the Rig Veda 10.129, the dark waters that are there primordially when Hiranyagarbha emerges from the dark waters. And similarly, Merthevnia is the brother of Bila. Bila means sacred tree. He is the god who is the symbolic world tree. And so you have their sacred tree and Merthevnia, dark ocean, juxtaposed as brothers in the Sons of Mil. So that tells me, at least, that really is the name for this primordial dark waters. But then we have it in this separate story, the plain of Merthevnia. So I think we can kind of picture that this is symbolically the same Merthevnia, the same dark ocean, the same primordial dark ocean. And it is covering, of course, the land. So that once again is the same kind of concept. In the primordial moment, the waters cover all, and the land has not emerged yet, and all of that, right? And then that, at least in one layer of the myth and the events that have to happen, in one layer, they have to kind of be defeated. The waters have to be defeated or dried up, as in the Tiamat type of myth, right? So I think that is what is happens here, with the Dagda being the hero god who performs that. Okay, so darkness of the sea, or it is under the sea's roof, or there was a magic sea over it, and an octopus therein, having a property of suction. It would suck in a man in armor till he lay at the bottom of its treasure bag. The Dagda came with his mace of wrath in his hand, and plunged it down on the octopus, and chanted these words: "Turn thy hollow head, turn thy ravening body, turn thy resorbent forehead. Avaunt, be gone." Then the magic sea retired with the octopus, and hence, may be, the place was called Mythstreams. And so we can see the Dagda has his mace, just as Marduk had a club, but also arrows of wind. The Dagda just has one weapon, it is his mace. He brings it down on the monster of the waters, the octopus. And so I would argue, of course, as I was saying, Tiamat is the female monster who herself embodies the waters, but she is coupled with the male Abzu, which is like the male aspect of the abyss, that is the waters as well. So I think we have similar here, where the plane, where the name Mythevnia is sort of like the backdrop of the maybe the male aspect. But in any case, you have then a monster there who is kind of embodying the power of the waters, because it is sucking the men in, of course. And this, we should really remember this detail of sucking the men of armor into the waters. We should remember this for the Norse parallel, which is the goddess of the sea, Ran, the goddess who embodies the sea, Ran. It's very much what she is kind of famous for. But in any case, so I would argue that this octopus is in the equivalent spot to Tiamat, and that makes the octopus a possible monstrous version of a goddess who we will kind of elaborate as we go forward here, right? So this is the possibility that the Tiamat parallel suggests, that you have this same kind of setup with the male Mythevnia, and then the monster who is there embodying the power, the potency of the waters, and she is defeated by the god using a weapon of wind, but also a mace. But in any case, as I went into in the Dagda stream, the Dagda here is said to have a mace of wrath. But this is just the English translation that the translators chose. And I think it's obscuring what this word really is, because we can go into the etymology of the Dagda's staff to see that it's probably a staff of breeze, implying breeze or breath power, and essentially it is a wind associated weapon. Okay, so he's probably, if you look at the etymology, he's probably using a weapon of wind, just like in the Tiamat story. And it makes perfect sense when you see what the effect of what he does here is, right? The entire effect of him slaying the octopus is that it dries the waters up. Logically, this appears like the effect of wind, of air. Air is what would dry up the waters, and so essentially you get that kind of same outcome. And it suggests that he's using. It suggests that the etymology of the staff's name does indeed connect to what it's doing, which is drying the water. So I will show you. I'll show you guys the etymology. Of course, the word is Anudha, ANFAD, ANFUD. There's different variations. ANFADH, and on Edil, it is suggested that this comes from a word spelled F-E-T-H. Okay, so one moment. All right, so this F-E with accent T-H, we can see there are a few definitions, and we can also see that, let's see. Yeah, stick. You can kind of see why it was, why wrath was chosen for the translation, because F-E-T-H, it can mean calmness, right? Calmness. And the staff itself is called an, another. So a negation, an, combined with F-E-T-H. So not calm. If you choose the translation of reading this word another as not calm, essentially choosing definition 3, you arrive at wrath, stormy, right? You can see that a calm sea. So the opposite of a calm sea would be a stormy sea. So it appears almost like his staff is like a staff of storm, a staff of whatever. There's different ways this could be read, as you can see. You can see that they're reading it as a staff of disturbance, a staff of non-tranquility, therefore wrath, loosely speaking. That's how English translators have translated it. And I think that's reasonable because, it could still connect to that. I think, the arrows of wind probably connect to storm wind as well. So there's continuity in that definition with the idea of wind already, but it's not as specific, right? So you can see calmness at sea. So the opposite of calmness at sea would be storminess at sea. And therefore, the storminess of the sea implies storm winds. So the winds are all there, and that's fine. However, if you look at definition 2, this, I think, is getting more to what appears to be, if you look at the comparative mythology as we've just done, and if you understand that the Dagda, in my Dagda stream, of course, I go through why the Dagda himself is the wind god. And so that, of course, is a huge factor in this. But not only is the Dagda the wind god mythologically, he also has this staff, and definition number 2 of the word is that it is connected with Seth, S-E-T-H, which means blow, right? Blow as in a breeze. They had a fair breeze, and all of that. And so this could mean, if number 2 is the correct definition instead of number 3, if it's more to do with just wind, then the an, the prefix, might not be the negation prefix an, it might be the intensifier prefix an. So of course, an can be an intensifier or a negation in Irish. So if obviously it's a destructive, terrible weapon, so it's probably not just like if the definition were blow, then the an would be unlikely to be the negation. It would make no sense that your weapon is called the non-windy or something like that. That's not really logical. But it would make sense if it was the staff of strong wind, the staff of strong blowing, staff of strong breeze. So an intensive another could be the staff of strong breeze, essentially. Okay, you can see it right there on easel that is a perfectly sensible definition using the exact same etymology, right? Essentially, the same word linguistically. It's just that translators, I think, they have no, the more generic one to choose is that it is just like stormy or wrathful. But I think once you understand mythologically, A, that the Dagda is the wind god, and B, that in the Tiamat parallel, they specifically use the wind weapon. And that is like the repeated core of the myth, is that the winds are used to dry up, to defeat the water monster. Wind defeats water. And I think that has to be taken into account when you kind of choose between these etymologies, to see that it seems much more likely to me that this was implying more specifically a wind weapon. This also, I should say, my associate, Bowen Sir, who advises me about Irish and Gaelic, he has mentioned to me that Another, which is spelled Onfadh or Anfadh, I guess in modern Gaelic, it is regularly used to mean essentially breath power, breath capacity. So it is the ability for a person to expend breath out of themselves. So there is a phrase using the word Onfadh, Another, which means he has good breath capacity or a good set of lungs, and this survives into modern Gaelic. Okay, so the point is, it should be clear that Another, that is the exact name of the staff used by the Dagda in this event. It appears that Mace of Wrath is much too generic for what it's really doing, first of all, what its mythological parallels are, and thirdly, the fact of the matter is Another very much means breath capacity, breeze, etc., even into modern Gaelic, as well as we can see in the Old Irish dictionary there. Okay, so I think that's a solid case for the fact that this octopus is the Tiamat parallel, embodying the Mirthevnia, the primordial dark waters, and that the Dag that is there is the wind god, using his staff of strong breeze to defeat this octopus and thereby make the waters recede. And now that is a part of the cosmogonical world creation. What's interesting about this, of course, is when we bring in the Morrigan as the mythological parallel of Danu, who we've tied to, who've shown is continuous, or equivalent to Tiamat in some ways. If you then kind of flesh this out, you have, of course, this octopus who's just a monster in this story. But what if this octopus is just the primordial monstrous form of another deity, of a goddess? And what if that goddess is the Morrigan? So the pieces start to kind of come together and fall into place and make a bigger picture of what is happening here, I think. So to jump to our direct comparison of the Morrigan and Danu, of the Vedic Danu. First of all, what have we got? We should look at one moment. We should look at the fact that the Morrigan is also said to be the same goddess as Anu, the figure named Anu, Anu, and Anu appears to be another sort of a version of the name of the goddess Danan, and of course there is famously this name, the Tuatha Danan, and there's of course this sort of floating concept of a goddess called Danu in Gaelic mythology, who the name Danu itself is not actually attested. It is different grammatical versions that people suggest there could have been originally a version that was spelled that was Danu, or some such thing like that. But we have these other variations such as Anu, like I mentioned, and so scholars have suggested that Anu even could be the result of a cutting of the first letter D, so that there could have originally been Danu, Danu, and it became Anu over time, because we still have variations that appear to be the same figure, and they are spelled like Danan and stuff like that. So with the D, but different forms. Okay, if that makes sense. And a lot of this has been sort of put put in clear order in a nice essay by a scholar named John Shaw. This is available on academia.edu, and it is called Indo-European Dragon Slayers and Healers and the Irish account of Giancecht and Mecha. Okay. And I'll show this on my screen. So hopefully that makes some sense. All right. Thank you guys. Thanks for joining. Thanks, Trust. And yeah, so hopefully that makes sense. Essentially, the Morrigan, as Shaw points out, is the Morrigan is Anu, and Anu is Danu. Anu is probably a cutting. Okay, here's where he goes into that, right? Danan is known in Irish mythology only as the mother of the gods, i.e. the Tua de Danan, but this position is not hers alone. A passage from the Shanas Cormac under the passage under the entry of Anna shows that the goddess Anna, also known as Anu, held an identical position. Anna, i.e. the mother of the Irish gods, well did she feed the gods. There is further evidence for the earlier equivalents of Danan and Anna, the two hills, Dachich Anand, Paps of Anu, or Paps of Anna, in Munster, from the Ban Shenachus, are called Dachich Danan, Paps of Danan. So it directly equates Danan and Anna in multiple places by the historian Keating in his History of Ireland, in addition to equivalents in functions and associations. The names Anna, genitive Anan, and Danan, genitive with no attested nominative. See, that's the issue. There's no attested form that is literally Danu that survives. But we have Danan, and then we have Anna with Anan. Okay, both exhibit genitive forms that are rare in Old Irish, suggesting that Anna or Anu may well be a simple variant of Danu with asterisk, so the reconstructed, earlier Celtic form of the name may have been at one point Danu. Danan arising, may have been a simple variant of Danu, Danan, arising from a metrical cutting of the initial consonant. And this is known as dichned, or beheading, that occasionally occurs as a conscious formation in Old Irish. So he gives a citation telling us that this kind of cutting of the first consonant was known to happen. And we see kind of the entire pattern around this name. Everything but Danu is there. And so it suggests that Danu just, was an earlier form and became Danan and became Anu and Anna. And that is a good, it's good to bring all those together and to see how full that case is, to be really sure that this is not just a sort of conflation or a mix-up. But I think if you read his entire article, it really shows that they did indeed see Anu as the same as Danan, and that there really is good evidence that there probably was a version that was just sort of like the lost genitive that used to be Danu. Okay, so Danu and Anu are probably the same thing originally. All right, and this again is that same. It's the Irish version of the same name that we saw in the Vedic Danu. It's the identical name actually, but it is. We saw continuous through Europe different river names, different. There are different divine figures with names connected to this root as well, and so from there, let's see. Shaw also goes through the ways in which the Morrigan is equated with Anu. So once you realize that Anu is just a form of the name Danu, probably, then it's really noteworthy that the Morrigan is called Anu. it is said in multiple places that Anu is just the name of the Morrigan, or that the Morrigan is the name of Anu, etc. If that can be established, then you have the Morrigan really is and was this Danu figure, sharing a name with the Vedic Danu, who we've touched on. So to kind of understand that parallel, of course, some of this is quite technical, so bear with me here while I track down these details. I highly recommend reading this entire article for everyone's self. And the number one thing I think mythologically that brings this into focus, sort of the linchpin, other than the linguistic stuff that I've mentioned, is the fact that the Morrigan is the mother of Mechi, right here. And Mechi is this serpent, okay? Once again, we're coming back to this theme that keeps popping up. Danu, her most famous child is Vritra himself, the most famous serpent who has to be slain to kind of save the world at that moment. And we have here the Morrigan. She is the one who is the mother of Mechi, and Mechi is, there are a couple different versions, okay? One version says that Mechi is a boy, a child, and in his heart are 3 serpents. And these 3 serpents are going to destroy and kind of waste all of Ireland. And so those serpents in the heart of the boy have to be killed. So in that version, Morrigan is the mother of a child in whose heart are 3 serpents. But in another version, Mechi is just a serpent. And this serpent does 3 turns or something like that. Like there's a triplicity to both, but I think in the version where it's just a single snake, it does 3 twists or turns. So yeah, so this is the version involving where it is a child and there are 3 serpents in his heart. It says, whence Berba Barrow. Into this river were flung the 3 snakes that were found in the heart of the Morrigan's son Mecha, after he was slain by Giankecht on Moy Mechi, which plain's name at first was Moy Fertig. The 3 hearts that were in Mecha bore the shape of 3 serpents' heads, and had not the killing of him come to pass, those snakes would have grown in his belly and eventually left no animals alive in Ireland. Whence he had slain Mechi, Giankecht burned the snakes, and their ashes he committed to the current, with the effect that it seethed and digested all living things that therein were. Yes. Okay. So you get the point there. No motion it made. The ashes of Mechi, the strongly smitten, the fell filth of the old serpent. 3 turns the serpent made. So you can see in this version, this is the other version, the serpent is singular and it makes 3 turns. It sought the soldier to consume him. It would have wasted by its doings all the kine, the cattle, of the indolent hosts of ancient Erin. Therefore Giankecht slew it. Their rude reason for clean destroying it, for preventing it ever from wasting worse than any wolf pack, from consuming utterly, known to me is the grave where he cast it, a tomb without walls or roof tree, its ashes evil without loveliness or innocence, found silent burial in noble barrow. So the serpent of the metrical version is not contained in Mechi's heart, but is Mechi himself. So you see the difference, and is large enough to attempt to consume his adversary. Nor does it have 3 heads. Instead, it makes 3 turns, possibly 3 coils of itself, maintaining its threefold aspect before it is slain and its ashes cast into the river. The river is boiled or seethes, etc. Okay, so that's the main point there, which is that the Morrigan is the mother of serpents, one way or another, right? In the 2 different versions, either she is the mother of them within the heart of her boy child, or she is directly the mother of the serpent. And obviously, I would argue that if we're looking at this as a deep Indo-European root, that most likely originally it was a serpent, and maybe the boy version was an alteration from that. But again, there's different ways to look at that. Either way, she is this sort of mother of this serpent, and it's a serpent that's going to destroy everything. And additionally, the god who has to defeat this serpent is Giancacht. Okay, so I go into in my book and elsewhere how Giancacht appears to be the parallel of Brihaspati, and this is because his alternate name is Kancha or something, Cainte, however that is pronounced, and it means speech. And he is the one who essentially chants over this this well of healing that they have in the battle of Moitura. And so he's sort of like does chant. He's there chanting. He's this sort of priestly healing god of chanting, and also his alternate name means speech itself. Brihaspati is the lord of speech, and he is sort of the master of doing these liturgical chants, formulations, chants, and all that sort of thing, because that's sort of a priestly role. And so I think that is, there's more to that argument that I go into why this should be the case, because in addition, like this Brihaspati Giancacht role seems to parallel Apollo in his aspect of father of Asclepius, I believe, is what I'm thinking of, because this sort of medical side, the healer gods, I believe this comes down to like Apollo Paion. Paions are like these magical chants or songs which have these magical powers, and it is noteworthy that Apollo is invoked and called Paion in the moment when he slays the serpent Typhon. I believe that's what I'm thinking of right now. Python. It is Python. In any case, because when he establishes the Pythia, the priestesses there are chanting for him, cheering for him, essentially helping him, and they are saying, "Hi, Paion." To him, it's this famous moment when he defeats Python, the serpent. So this is continuous with the fact that Brihaspati, Lord of the Speech, is the one who helps Indra to slay Vritra and also Vala. So he's there kind of like as a helper with Indra. And in the Vala myth especially, I think he takes the center stage much more. Okay, and you can look in the Rig Veda, there are Vritra and Vala, the sort of two, almost like, twin serpents. They're not actual twins, but they are like siblings in a sense. And Vala is much more, there are more versions where Brihaspati takes the center role of defeating Vala by using his shouts, his chants. So he uses his power of speech to destroy the serpent Vala, much more specifically. And so he's kind of like just there as sort of the helper of Indra in other versions, and they go back and forth because there's so many versions in the Rig Veda of these serpent fights. So you can kind of see, I think, that this Lord of the Chants was also sort of a medical god because of the healing power that was combined with that, and that this became what Giancacht. This is kind of why, because Giancacht is not an Indra. I think there's very little argument for that, but Giancacht is the serpent slayer here, and his alternate name means speech. He is the one chanting over the well of healing, and he uses he slays Meki. And let me see, I think, I thought there was maybe a mention of using a shout or something, but maybe not. Maybe he just slays him in a more vague kind of way. So that's something else to look into. And so from there, you have the concept that this Meki is a serpent who fits the role of kind of a Vala / Vritra, perhaps. But either way, you can see how that slight kind of shift. He's still the child of the Morrigan. And why is the Morrigan being the only mother here of like the serpent that has to be defeated in a similar way as we see in the Vedas? Well, it seems continuous with the fact that her alternate name is Anu, and Anu is a cutting version of Danu, and Danu is just the name remained continuous apparently, but it all kind of fits together to suggest that that is the case, that the name really did kind of stay more or less the same of this figure who was Danu in Vedic material and Danu in sort of older, maybe Proto-Celtic or Common Celtic period, and eventually the Danu form, the D, the genitive got lost of that form, and different versions survived under the names Anna, Anu, and Danan. But we still have the mythos of her being the kind of primary goddess, because we know the Morrigan is a goddess, who nonetheless is the mother of serpents. And of course, Danu, if she really is Danu, like that name still means the same thing. It still means waters, streams. So she's the one embodying this sort of celestial cosmic stream of water. And that combination, it's the same kind of signature. It's the same kind of combination that we've been looking at, where this sort of dark mother goddess embodies the waters, but then also is the parent of the primary serpent or multiple. Okay, and that sort of Jiankekt Brihaspati rule ties it together as well as a element of continuity that adds to the picture. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Let's see. There's more here. Morrigan. Here is some more evidence that he brings together. In the Ben Shenahus, under the name Anand, we are told Anand, that is Morrigu, from whom the two paps of Anna on Luachar Dedav, another wife of Vedagda. The curious equivalence Morrigu equals Anu or Anna occurs also in the Lower Gawala, where the three daughters of Ernvas are listed as Bav, Macha, and Anna. Okay, so Anna takes the place in the trio of the Morrigu. Just the name Anna just is there. And then it says outright in that same text, Bav and Macha, rich in stores, and Morrigu, who dispenses confusion. Finally, in the Toin Bo Regamna, Morrigu Bav appears as a woman wearing a red cloak as she chants spells against that model of warrior conduct, Cuchulainn. Okay, that is a contentious claim that I want to go back to. And actually, I disagree with this conclusion that it is the Morrigan. So there is a figure named Bav, and Bav is, of course, a name of the Morrigan, but it becomes a generic term for a witchy woman of sorts. And so because of that, there's more complexities to who this particular Bav in the Cuchulainn tales really is. Let's come back to that. But in any case, what else do we want to say on this topic? We have pretty, many instances. There's one other that I'll just bring up right here. There's one other piece of evidence, just so that I have all bases covered. So you can look at the Lower Gawala Aaron, the Book of Invasions, of course. in the Tua de Danann section, and it tells us about Ernvas, right? And Ernvas is this mother figure, quite mysterious. She's sort of most important in this text as being the mother of the Morrigan, because it says here, Ernvas had other 3 daughters, Bav and Macha and Morrigu, whose name was Anand. Okay, so right there it says Morrigu, her name was Anand. So we see repeated over and over, essentially in at least 3 or 4 places, that the Morrigu, or one of the accepted trio goddesses like Macha and Bav, one or all of these gets equated with Anand, and it just says, this really is Anand or Anu, and these are alternate names of one another. So it's pretty well established. If it was just a one-off, we might think it was a coincidence or a mix-up. It just really doesn't seem like a mix-up when they do it over and over again, right? And when we have this comparative picture where we can look at the Vedic and other places and say, actually, this does line up. It's making perfect sense that she would be, because the Morrigan is the mother of the serpents and these other elements. Okay. And so the next interesting point is the fact that the Dagda is her consort. Okay. And this, once you have the basics laid out, you can start to understand what what the implications of the Dagda's being paired with the Morrigan and the mythology that they are involved in, what that can tell us in terms of further parallels and what that means. Because, of course, what we looked at earlier in the stream is the fact that the Dagda slays the octopus. The octopus holds the role that seems equivalent to Tiamat, or to, of course, and Tiamat, of course, seems equivalent to the Vedic Danu. This is very, very interesting. If it could be shown to be true that the octopus rather, is the primordial monstrous form of the Morrigan, the Dagda slays or defeats it in one way or another. And then in another story, the Dagda becomes consort of the Morrigan. That's fascinating. And it could be a sort of continuous concept where, because he's the one who defeats and in a sense tames, dries up the waters, that he becomes its sovereign in a sense, or he unites with it, at least gets some union with it and draws power from it, because of course the Morrigan helps the Dagda if he will lie with her, essentially. And okay, so but this sort of two-prong these stories are split up. The Dagda defeats the octopus, and elsewhere the Dagda unites with the Morrigan, but they're 2 separate stories. But if we then throw this over to the Norse material, it appears possible, at least an interesting case to investigate, how those 2 kind of separate mythemes overlap or are told in different ways, almost suggesting sort of like the unity of this same goddess type who is both of those things, if that makes sense. If 2 things are separate, right, in the Irish material, but they are like treated more like one continuous goddess, or at least different figures who are more obviously connected in the Norse material, that can be a sort of mirror to suggest that these that the 2 halves of the picture are related, that the octopus who is defeated may indeed be continuous with the goddess who is united with. Okay, so let's look at the Dagda and the Morrigan. How is the Morrigan Tavarn? Okay, this is a great question. I'm not sure if the Morrigan is Tavarn. I actually kind of am leaning away from that concept. The Morrigan appears to me to be a lower manifestation of Tavarn. Tavarn being the ultimate primordial waters, which are like the female aspect of the transcendent absolute. Okay, that's like Tavarn. But I think that the Morrigan is more like the dark. It's like one step down from that. Okay, so I'll go into that if I can. There are different levels to the waters, but this goes in a bit deeper. I just think that I think that okay, we'll go into this. I want to build to this. This is a great question, and so much here to say. Hey, thank you, Mega Mario. Appreciate that. All you guys, thanks for joining and watching. So I'm gonna go to Ka Moitura, which you may be familiar with. Second Battle of Moitura. And yeah, let's see. So this is where the Dagda wait a second. Okay, here we go. So this is speaking of the Dagda. It says, he saw the woman at Unshin in Koran, washing with one of her feet at Alav Eke, that is Aganach, south of the water, and the other at Liscani, north of the water. So of course that means, she has her legs, her feet astride the water, stretched far apart. Yeah, with her body, on the crossing the water, one leg on one side, one leg on the other. There were 9 loosened tresses on her head. The Dagda spoke with her, and they united. The bed of the couple was the name of that place from that time on, and the woman mentioned here is the Morrigan, it says. And so this is quite interesting. He then, of course, gets wisdom, knowledge from her, or help from her in terms of the battle. Or she's going to send help. She's going to send helpers in the battle, essentially, as part of this. And this is interesting because, when he comes upon her, she has her legs astride a river, a body of water here, and then, secondly, as the second part of the story, he unites with her. This becomes interesting when the parallel of the Dagda to Thor is thoroughly understood. And again, so I'm going to have to refer this back to my other arguments from the Dagda stream and from my book and my Dagda video that I have, my dedicated Dagda video, where I show that the Dagda is the Thor type. And this goes back to what Georges Dumézil laid the groundwork for, which is that Thor very emphatically, almost more prominently than his thunder traits, he has the wind god mythos in a lot of what he does, and even his sort of brutish raw strength. It's more in line with the Vayu type of the Vedas, so that ultimately Dumézil sees Thor as essentially wind/thunder combination of these powers, or what have you, of deity types. So that Thor is, in Vedic terms, it would be like Vayu-Indra. Okay, wind, thunder. And so when you then understand, this is the strong man brute with the club weapon, who does a particular set of narrative mythemes also, and that he's the one with the immense appetite, almost comically so. That is Thor, and that is also the Dagda. The Dagda is eats this crazy mixture in a pit in this same text here we have, and so and he has the club and all that, and as we went into before, he has the Mace of Wrath, which arguably could be more precisely defined as the Mace of Strong Breeze, as its alternate sort of definition there, if we look at the comparative mythology case for it. I also go into how, the Dagda, his sort of taking and his killing and reviving with the same staff. It reminds of the two-sided value of the Avestan Avestan material, yes, or the post-Avestan material, where there's the good and bad Y, who give and take life, essentially. So that's kind of the wind trait. The life breath is given and taken by the god of breath and wind. So in any case, once the Thor Dagda parallel is sort of established beforehand, then it starts to be interesting. You can then understand and interpret why Thor has a mytheme here that is similar to what we saw with the Dagda, where the Dagda, of course, comes upon the Morrigan, and her legs are astride a river. Thor also comes upon a female divine being, and that is the giantess, or the Jotun, named Gjálp. Gjálp is the daughter of Ran, and Ran is the embodied ocean. So she's essentially the waters, and she is terrifying and fearful, a divinity who is, I'm not sure if she's classed among the Aesir, even, that sort of thing. That would be something to look to sort of pinpoint whether or not that is true. But in any case, we see Ran as a fearful type of goddess, and her daughters. She has 9 wave daughters, the 9 daughters of Gjálp. So let's just jump over here. The 9 daughters of Ran, rather, and Gjálp is one of them. This implies that Gjálp is like an aspect of the waters, perhaps. If the daughters are like the waves, or somehow modes or emanations of the waters, then they could all be sort of water faces of the ocean, faces of the abyssal waters, under different names, if that makes any sense. Let's see. And I will just recall that, as I pointed out in the octopus story of the Din Shenahas of Moy Marthevnia, the octopus there, who I'm saying is like the terrible primordial form of the Morrigan, embodying this dark waters in the feminine aspect. That octopus specifically is described as sucking men in armor down to its depths. That very much is what Ran is all about. Is known for sort of all the people that she brings down to her depths, as if in nets, as if using nets, or as if the net of Ran is sort of a term for this, for falling into the waters, being pulled into the waters, and all of that. Okay, so this is Gjálp again. Gjálp, we have here the daughter of Ran. Oh, sorry. The daughters of Geroth. Sorry, Geroth. And Geroth. Let's see. So this is another issue, actually. Geroth is the father, and you can see that roar, sea wave. Sea wave is one of the, or is the related. So there is the Icelandic word meaning roar / sea / wave, and so her name might be to scream or roar, but it's related to sea and wave. So that's kind of a tricky one there. And the other point is that it says, in Voluspa hin Skama, Gjálp and Grape, her sister, are listed among the 9 mothers of Heimdall. Okay, so Gjálp is also mentioned in the Thulur and in kennings of skaldic poetry. And Yes. If you go to the Nine Mothers of Heimdall, then this is how you get to the concept that that Gjalp was probably a daughter of Ran, right? It says scholars have theorized that Heimdall's nine mothers could be the nine daughters of Aegir and Ran, the nine goddesses who personify the sea waves. Okay, so this is rather than being stated outright in the sources, this is an argument based on, you have these nine mothers of Heimdall, and then you have the nine daughters of Aegir and Ran, two separate nine goddess enumerations, right? But Gjalp has this name that can be related to sea and wave, as we saw. And then Heimdall himself, as I've argued, is should be equated with the Vedic Apam Napat, the child of the waters. If he's the child of the waters, mythologically, as I show, then his nine mothers should be the waters. It all comes together once again, but there's unfortunately multiple layers to all these arguments. But you can see right there, if Heimdall really is a child of the waters, then his nine mothers should be just the female aspects of the waters, which would make them very much coinciding with, or the same exact thing as, the nine daughters of Aegir and Ran. And it's possible different names were given to these nine goddesses who personify the waters in some respect. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Heimdall is born on the edge of the earth. That would be where the waters are, if you can see that. He was endowed with the earth's power, with the cold sea, and with boar's blood. Those two aspects reinforce the fact that the nine mothers of Heimdall probably are the nine waves. Otherwise, yeah, it just makes the most sense of everything. And of course, other arguments could be made, but scholars, as it says here, scholars seem to theorize, and most people I've talked to are pretty comfortable with Gjalp being this nine daughters of Gjalp of the nine daughters being the nine mothers of Heimdall as well. This then logically also is continuous and makes sense, because when Thor comes upon Gjalp, her legs are astride a river, and she's making the river itself swell from her bodily fluids, it says. So she is the source of waters, and not only that, but the source of a river, as we saw Danu itself. Of course, it could be continuous with just the primordial waters, heavenly waters, and all of that. But more specifically, it gets applied to river names, okay? As we saw, Danube and Don and all these others. And so very much connects to rivers, and Gjalp is there creating waters from her body. She probably is a water-related goddess, especially since she's one of these nine. It's probably all fitting together as a logical whole. The sort of the once you have that Norse case, of course, that Norse case is unto itself a little puzzle that you can argue whether or not the nine mothers are the same as the nine daughters. Nine mothers of Heimdall are the same as the nine daughters of Ran, and all of that. But if you accept that they, conditionally, hypothetically, they are, then the comparative picture of what Gjalp does makes more sense in comparison to the Irish and Vedic, and that reinforces the case that it probably is working, that the parallel is probably working, right? So there are layers to how you can kind of check and verify, and that should be done. Okay, next we have I'm going to just read the actual story of from Skaldskaparmál here. moment, I guess. Just having a hard time finding it in all my things here. There it is. Okay. So Thor is, of course, journeying about, and Thor proceeded to the river named Vimur, greatest of all rivers. There he girded himself with the girdle of might and braced firmly downstream with Grither's rod, and Loki held on behind by the girdle of might. When Thor came to mid-current, the river waxed so greatly that it broke high upon his shoulders. Then Thor sang this: Wax thou not now, Vimur, for I fain would wade thee into the giant's garth. Know thou, if thou waxest, then waxeth God's strength in me, as high up as the heaven. Then Thor saw Gjalp, daughter of Gerothur, standing in certain ravines, one leg in each, spanning the river. Okay, so this should remind at least of the picture of the Morrigan spanning the river with her legs when the Dagda comes upon her. Well, Thor is the parallel of the Dagda mythologically, and in terms of having the sort of wind parallels that we see. One leg in each spanning the river. And she was causing the spate. That meaning, of course, she's causing the water to rise, causing the onrush of the water. Then Thor snatched up a great stone out of the river and cast it at her, saying these words: At its source should a river be stemmed. Nor did he miss that at which he threw. In that moment he came to the shore and took hold of a rowan clump, and so climbed out of the river, whence comes the saying that the rowan is Thor's deliverance. Now when Thor came before Gerothur, the companions were shown first into the goat fold for their entertainment. And there was one chair there for a seat, and Thor sat there. Then he became aware that the chair moved under him and up toward the roof. He thrust Grither's rod up against the rafters and pushed back hard against the chair. Then there was a great crash, and screaming followed. Under the chair had been Gerothur's daughters, Gjalp and Grape, and he had broken both their backs. Okay, so there's more to that story, of course, but I want to highlight his encounters with Gjalp, because as I said, the Dagda has two separate stories, right? In one story, he encounters the Morrigan at the waters with her legs astride. And in a separate story, he fights and defeats and slays the octopus, who embodies the feminine aspect of the primordial dark waters. And he does so, of course, with his staff of wind. But in any case, those are two separate events. Interestingly, in this one single story, there are two portions to it, two separate moments where Thor meets Gjalp, right? So that's interesting. So it's like two separate beats, two separate meetings, but combined into one story. In the first moment, he encounters her at the waters. Interestingly, instead of uniting with her in conjugal union, he throws a stone at her right away and tries to stop it up. But in any case, he has an interaction with her. He has an encounter with her. Then going further on, he encounters her again, and she tries to crush him against the roof, and he pushes down, and all of that crashes down and crushes her underneath. Okay, breaks her back, along with her sister, of course, who they are probably both these sort of wave daughters, I would argue, of continuations of Ram. Okay, so if that's the case, you have combined here in one story two events: the meeting at the waters with the legs astride, and secondly, the fight where he defeats and subdues and slays her. So I would argue, of course, that this is the same two mythemes that are split apart, where the Dagda defeats the octopus in one story, and the Dagda encounters the Morrigan in a separate story with her legs astride the waters. So because we can see that the Morrigan is aka Danu, as I argued earlier in the stream or showed from the John Shaw article, Morrigan really is another name of Danu, most likely. That is just the water's name, and it is cognate or identical to almost the Vedic version, combined with the fact that Gyalp probably is, again, a emanation, a daughter, continuous wave daughter of the ocean herself. It makes these seem like two versions of one longer mythos, right? The mythos involves two aspects to it: the wind god encountering this divine being, goddess, with legs astride the waters, and a different part of that being where he actually defeats that same sort of embodiment of the waters. So there is no story that I know of Thor or anybody defeating Ran herself or defeating an octopus in that way. Of course, Thor fights Jormungandr, and this can be, that's a different mytheme, though. That's the problem. That's an entirely different mytheme. Like I said earlier, the Morrigan has a son named Meki the Serpent, and he's defeated by Giankecht. That serpent is separate from the octopus. So there's these different events that you have to be able to separate. But ultimately, I would argue that the version of the sort of octopus defeat, Tiamat defeat that we have in the Norse tradition is where Ran's daughter, like an emanation or continuation of her, Gyalp, as well as Grape, are defeated, are shown to be, she's shown to be the source of waters of the river, and then immediately afterwards, they are defeated and killed by Thor himself. Yeah, it looks like two versions, an Irish version of these two events made more separate in that version, but we should probably esoterically understand that the octopus is this same type because it's in this slot, continuous in other branches, and then you have the story more combined into one story here in Skaldskaparmal, where you can see the two portions of the story happening back to back with one figure, Gyalp, and her sister, of course, who's just, they're probably aspects of one another, kind of like how the Morrigan has multiple names herself, right? So that is also a continuous feature. Okay, so let's see, what else is there? I should say that the Morrigan is also noted to be identified with the Lamia. So it's this the Lamia, I think that's Greek, probably. This sort of has serpentine associations. But let me pull this up real quick. Lilith, Hera. So maybe. But there are connections in the Irish glossaries themselves. They equate the Morrigan with the Lamia, and I think there are other places where they equate her with like the Furies potentially, but the Lamia is a very interesting one. Hold on a second. So this is just a summary from a blog, or a quote from a blog that they've put together. The earliest sources for the Morrigan are glosses in Latin manuscripts and glossaries, collections of glosses. In a 9th century manuscript containing the Latin Vulgate translation of the book of Isaiah, the word Lamia is used to translate the Hebrew Lilith. Okay, so somebody just mentioned Lilith, right? So you're on the right track, right? So they equate Lamia with Lilith, and a gloss explains this as a monster in female form that is a Morrigan, a monster in female form that is a Morrigan. So the Irish glosses themselves are calling the Morrigan a monster and also equating her with the Lamia. And then Cormac's glossary, also 9th century, and a gloss in the later manuscript H3.18 both explain the plural word gudeman, specters, with the plural form morigna, The 8th century O'Mulconry's glossary says that Macha is one of the 3 Morrigan. Okay, so the point of that is just that we have the Lamia as this other reference point. Okay, right? The Lamia is a child-eating monster, night-haunting demon, often depicted as a woman with a serpent's tail. Okay, so if you can Wikipedia that yourself if you'd like, but there are these famous paintings even of a woman with a terrifying serpent's tail. So it's like she has a serpentine aspect. Secondly, what's fascinating is when Cuchulainn confronts, or rather when the Morrigan confronts Cuchulainn at one point in the Toimh Baculnia, she turns into 3 animals or 3 forms, and I'm trying to remember exactly what they are, but I think they are serpents, or a serpent, a cow, and something else, which if anyone can remember what the third thing is, there's a piece of trivia question for you. But yeah, she turns into a cow and a serpent, I believe. That's fascinating because the cow is what Danu is identified with, right? As we mentioned in the Rig Veda. And Tiamat herself is associated with a cow form and with serpents. So it's this cow/serpent theme that seems to come up repeatedly. And we know the Morrigan takes other forms, of course, and is associated with ravens and things. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ziggy. And so the point is, the glossaries are saying that she is like this monster type form, identifying with her with a serpent type of creature, serpent woman. And secondly, I think in the Toimh Baculnia, when she confronts Cuchulainn, she turns into a serpent at one point. These are like traces, I would argue, of this more serpentine form that has its full esoteric expression as the octopus of Murthevia. That's like her terrifying, monstrous primordial form that gets defeated by the Dagda. But then, of course, she's a goddess. I think she then just takes her other forms. So then I would argue because of this, of course. Okay, the other really important thing I want to touch on real quick is that the Morrigan is the seeress of the Battle of Moytura. Okay, so at the conclusion of Moytura, let me pull this up to make sure that I'm referencing the right thing. But everyone knows this prophecy that she gives at the conclusion of the battle, where it is very reminiscent of the Voluspa prophecy in its specific details. So many texts open that I have to flip through. Apologize. Okay, so this is the end of the battle. Then after the battle was won and the slaughter had been cleaned away, the Morrigan, the daughter of Ernvas, proceeded to announce the battle and the great victory which had occurred there to the royal heights of Ireland and to its she-hosts, to its chief waters, and to its river mouths. And that is the reason Bav still relates great deeds. Have you any news? Everyone asked her then. Peace up to heaven, peace down to heaven, earth beneath heaven, strength in each, a cup very full, full of honey, mead in abundance, summer and winter, peace up to heaven. And then she also prophesied the end of the world, foretelling every evil that would occur then, and every disease and every vengeance, and she chanted the following poem. I shall not see a world which will be dear to me, summer without blossoms, cattle will be without milk, women without modesty, men without valor, conquests without a king, woods without mast, sea without produce, false judgments of old men, false precedents of lawyers, every man a betrayer, every son a reaver. The son will go to bed with his father. The father will go to the bed of his son. Each his brother's brother-in-law, he will not seek any woman outside his house. In evil time, son will deceive his father, daughter will deceive. Okay, so that's this famous thing showing that the Morrigan, especially under the title of Bav, is a seeress, or even the seeress of the gods, the divine beings, in a sense. Okay, and And that is the grand conclusion of this famous battle, of course. So then if you compare that to the Völuspá, it's the same theme, it's the same style, it's the same topic. I would like to just be able to reference it really quickly without going into the whole thing. We'll see if I can do that. The sun turns black, earth sinks in the sea, the hot stars down from heaven are whirled, fierce grows the steam and the life-feeding flame, till fire leaps high above heaven itself. Now Garm howls loud, the fetters will burst, and the wolf run free. Much do I know, and more can see, of the fate of the gods, the mighty in fight. Now do I see the earth anew rise all green from the waves again. The cataracts fall, etc., etc. Okay. Hard is it on earth with mighty whoredom. Okay, right. This is the passage. This is, of course, the seeress she is the speaker of the Völuspá. It is the prophecy of the spa, the Völuspá, spay, however it's pronounced. That is what Völuspá means. Spa or spay is the word for a seeress. Völuspá, and so she's the speaker, and she says, now Garm howls loud. Much do I know, and more can see, of the fate of the gods, the mighty in fight. Brothers shall fight and fell each other, and sisters' son shall kinship stain. Hard is it on earth, with mighty whoredom, axe time, sword time. Shields are sundered, wind time, wolf time, ere the world falls, nor ever shall men each other spare. Fast move the sons of Mim, and fate is heard in the note of the Gjallarhorn. Loud blows Heimdall, the horn is aloft. In fear quake all who on hell roads are. Yggdrasil shakes and shiver on high the ancient limbs, and the giant is loose. To the head of Mim does Odin give heed, but the kinsman of Surt shall slay him soon. Okay, so you get the point, of course. It is brother against brother, father against son, and all of that, just like in the Morrigan's prophecy. It's the end times being prophesied by the seeress, the divine seeress of the gods, essentially. And I think the Völuspá is about let's see. In stanza 1, the Volva or wise woman, called upon by Odin, answers him and demands a hearing. I'm forgetting now if the Völuspá. So, of course, Odin calls upon a Volva. I'm forgetting if this is like a dead Volva or not, if that's a different story. So you guys can look into that. Of course, it doesn't really matter that much. But it is a Volva, a sort of unnamed seeress. So my argument would be that this Volva, whoever it may be, whether it's a dead woman or a goddess, that she is an emanation, or she is the voice of this goddess, the seeress goddess, who ultimately goes back to Ran. So Ran would be sort of the divine voice of the seeress, just like the Morrigan herself is sort of the seeress. Well, the Morrigan / Danu's equivalent is Gjálp / Ran. And therefore, that's probably the divine essence, the divine speaker underlying whoever the Volva of the Völuspá is. Because it's kind of like, if you trace these back to, an Indo-European concept, a concept that would have been, common to the Celtic and the Germanics originally, it points back to something at the root where there was, it's a divine voice coming through to tell this prophecy, and it should trace back to one of the divinities, I believe, at least. And so this can then be sort of supported by what it says about Gjálp and Ran themselves. And what it says is that they are seeresses, both of them. So both Ran and Gjálp are called seeresses, using the word spa or spay. As we said, Völuspá is the prophecy of the spa or spay, seeress. And Gjálp and Ran are called seeress. So let's pull this up as well to show the evidence. Okay, so where do we have it? Okay, well, let's see. There's a couple different words for seeress, so it could have been a different word, but maybe if I go to Ran, we can find it. So this is describing Ran, and essentially her main epithet is that she is Gymir's spray cold spa. That is the word for the seeress, spa, S-P-A-E, spay wife. So she is a spay wife, a seeress wife of Gymir. So this is Ran, and she is prominently a seeress, a spay. And I know for a fact that Gyalp also gets called either spay or a different word for a seeress. But I just can't find that right now, so you guys can turn that up somewhere. But I'll post it if I find it again. And so this confirms that she could be the spay, the spa of the Voluspa, or that she's the divine voice or essence underlying that vulva, at least, because she is a seeress goddess. This, of course, it's just one more thing that is consistent with the Morrigan. The Morrigan is very much the seeress. Ran, though people don't always realize, is a seeress as well, and it's one of her only kind of descriptions even. Okay, and then of course it says in Skaldskaparmal, it explains that Ran is the name of Aegir's wife, that is the male ocean god, and the names of their 9 daughters are as was written above. Then the Aesir discovered that Ran had a net in which she caught everyone that went to sea. So this is the story of the origin of gold being called fire or light. And from such kennings, the practice has now developed of calling gold fire of the sea, Sevar Nither, which of course, fire. Oh no, that's a different one. Okay. Calling gold fire of the sea. Okay. And of all terms for it, since Aegir and Ran's names are also terms for the sea, and hence gold is now called fire of lakes or rivers and of all river names. And okay, she's listed among the goddesses, among the Aesinir. Okay, so that's important to note that Ran and her daughters very much overlap the categories of Jotun and goddesses, right? Because Gyalp appears as a Jotun, but Gyalp is just the wave daughter of Ran. And Ran is this terrifying goddess who pulls everyone under the waters so much that she seems almost outside the society of the gods. But she's also a goddess. It's the same kind of concept, I think, with the Morrigan, where she is kind of outside of the society of gods, but yet she is, she's so like primordial and important and powerful that she is a goddess, but she has this dark aspect that kind of puts her also overlapping with the destructive forces, as we've seen, and the Jotun that are kind of expressions of her, some of her emanations, some of her daughters and children, some of Ran's daughters, that is, are Jotun straightforwardly, but they're continuous with her as a divinity. So it complicates these categories, I think. Okay, let's see. Let me think for just a moment. What else we needed to say about this? Just basically, I wanted to touch, just to reiterate, Ran has, it's a story that Ran has a net that the sea's grasp. Ran's mouth is called the sea's grasp, and it's like she has a net that pulls everyone Ran had a net in which she caught everyone that went to sea. And the octopus of Mirthevnia that I said, it says, an octopus had the property of suction. It would suck in a man in armor till he lay at the bottom of its treasure bag. Treasure bag, even. Okay, even the treasure bag concept could be connecting to what we just read here, where gold is called the fire or light of Ran because of this story somehow. I'm not sure exactly how that connects. Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder, unless it has to do with just, ships that sink with gold in them, then there's gold at the bottom of the sea, or if this just has to do with gold. I'm not sure. Yeah, gold being in rivers and discoverable in rivers, but that's not the sea. Or gold having to do with the light or fire that is seen at sea. I'm not sure. What do you guys think about that? But in any case, it's interesting that gold is brought in here. The gold of the sea. Very mysterious. I don't know. Do you think that connects to the concept that when the men of armor are pulled under by the octopus, it's like they're put in her treasure bag. They become treasure, or maybe like their treasure becomes hers. It's like ships traveling around would have valuables in them, including gold. And when they get pulled under, it's like she's like a monster taking their gold, taking their treasure, putting that in her treasure bag at the bottom of the sea. So all of that is worth thinking about, at least. Okay. These are the main points, I guess. I've got a little list here. One moment. Galp. So also of interest, I think, we had how Galp fulfills the sort of two sides of the Dagda's mythos, in that he encounters the divine woman with her legs astride the river, and then he also defeats the woman who seems to be that same emanation of the ocean, the divine of the primordial ocean, daughter of the primordial ocean. In that case, he fulfills those two things, but Thor does not marry Galp, other than throwing a stone at her, essentially to plug up whatever water is coming out of her, right? So that's interesting. But it's not like he lays with her, and unites with her conjugally. Galp doesn't become Thor's consort. But what's interesting is, if you see the 9 daughters of Ran as faces of one another, of just kind of like we have the 3 Morrigan, 3 Morrigu, and they are aspects of one another. The 3 Morrigu, such as Bav, Macha, and the Morrigan, or other variations like Nevin, or whoever gets included. That is a triple goddess, right? They can be treated as one goddess with 3 names. You could say the same for the 9 daughters. Instead of 3, it's 9. And if that's the case, then it's interesting that Thor does become the consort of one of the other 9 daughters of Ran. Okay, so that should not be ignored, right? If you're following what I'm saying, if the 9 daughters are really faces of one, or a group who are somehow continuous, then it is noteworthy that he does this thing where he defeats 2 of them, two of the sisters, and then he marries a different one. Okay, and that is Yarn Saxa. So you can look up Yarn Saxa. Very interesting here, but I will pull this up to show. Okay, this is the list of the 9 daughters, so this is the 9 mothers of Heimdall. So once again, it's this, and so this means that Yarn Saxa is very much a sister of Galp and Grape. Galp, Grape, Aistla, Erigyafa, Ulfrun, and Angeja, Imd, Atla, and Yarn Saxa. So Thor canonically defeats Gjálp and Grape in the story I described, and then becomes consort of their sister, Jarnsaxa. So is that not significant in this parallel that I'm describing? I think it has to be, but you can look at it however makes sense to you. But let's go to Jarnsaxa. So she is described as the lover of Thor and the mother of his son Magni. Very interesting. What else can we find about her? Her name, of course, means iron dagger, essentially, or the one with the iron knife. Okay. In the story of Thor's duel with Hrungnir, Snorri refers to Magni as the son of Thor and Jarnsaxa. And at the end of the story, Odin says that Thor did wrong to offer the giant's splendid horse Gulfaxi to Magni, the son of a giantess, rather than to himself. Whether Jarnsaxa is also the mother of Movi is nowhere mentioned. But in any case, incredibly interesting. So I think, there's an argument there, which you can kind of see for yourself. The argument would be that Jarnsaxa is another face of the same goddess who has 9, is the 9 sisters plus their mother, who is over the totality of the waters of the ocean, and they are the sort of waves or expressions thereof. Thor encounters one of them, legs astride a river, defeats 2 of them, marries another. The Dagda encounters the Morrigan, unites, marries her, becomes consort of her in a sense. The Morrigan gets called the wife of the Dagda, even though it doesn't say that right there that they get married. Elsewhere, she does get called the wife of the Dagda, I believe, and then, of course, defeats the octopus. So I think these are two different versions of the same wider mythos. Like a puzzle that is, a picture of a mythos expressed a little differently in these 2 different branches, but you can kind of look at them against each other like a mirror, like 2 mirrors or whatever you want to say. Okay. Ran is like the octopus in a sense, pulling people under the waters. Ran is the seeress, the spray-cold wife, the spray-cold spay wife of Geimir. And I think Geimir is usually equated as potentially another name of Aegir, but that's argued as well by scholars. What else? Okay. Then I will go into, so it's also interesting that Jarnsaxa, the first part of her name means iron. The mother of the Morrigan is Ernvas, which means iron death or iron slaughter. So that could be a continuity. It's worth putting out there, but I think there's more to that picture as well, where Ernvas might instead be a name of the Kalyak. So this is what I would be pointing toward with my argument, is that Ernvas might be the Kalyak for other reasons that I'll touch on. And that would make the Morrigan actually like a daughter of the Kalyak. Even though it's a different setup because, okay, Ernvas could maybe Ernvas is like Ran, and the Morrigan is like Gjálp and her sisters. But I don't think that makes perfect sense. It's one of these just sort of theoretical things you have to speculate on. But I would just say that the Morrigan is a more all-encompassing goddess. She's encompassing all the aspects of what this is. Danu, she's the one who is Danu. Ernvas is not necessarily. And so yeah, I think that we should say that the Morrigan equals Ran and all her daughters, and they're all faces of one another. And then that Ernvas in the Irish represents a higher goddess like the Kalyak. The Kalyak is much more equatable with Frauhalla and even with Frigg, I think. So that's another tangent. But Frauhalla especially Frauhalle, the hag face, that seems to be the other side of Frigg, essentially. You know what I mean? That's another tangent. So yeah, let's then, that it's sort of a good bridge, because one of the biggest issues that comes out of this is whether there's a distinction between the Morrigan and the Cailleach, or whether they're continuous and faces of one another. So it's the same problem. And I think that the answer is that it's both. So I think there is a distinction being maintained a lot of the time between the Morrigan and the Cailleach type, and it's crystallized. It's the most clear in this genealogy of the Morrigan. Very explicitly is the daughter of Ernvas. So that means Ernvas isn't the Morrigan, right? If the Morrigan is the daughter of Ernvas, then the Morrigan is this lower category unto herself. And Ernvas is something that gives rise to her, I think. Okay? That implies that there are levels to this. You know, there is a level distinction between them, but there are moments where the Morrigan is very much continuous with the Cailleach, or takes on the semblance of the Cailleach. And this goes back to James Fields here. James Fields, this is material that you have pointed out to me, right? There's a good case to be made that there are points of overlap between the Morrigan and the Cailleach. One of them being, let me pull something else up here real quick. So I'm forgetting exactly where this is from, what text this is from, but it says, this is an old Irish text, medieval Irish text. It says, "Then it was that the Morrigan, daughter of Ernvas, came from the fairy dwellings in the guise of an old hag," and the word is Shentania, or however that's pronounced, Sentainne, Shentania, and or Shentania, Shentan, I don't know. And the Shentania, is this word for an old woman that is usually applied to the Cailleach. So in the lament of the Caliaberi, it's rather titled the lament of the old woman or something, and the word is of the Shentania. So it's kind of like the most famous poem that's given in the voice of the Cailleach herself. She's called the Shentania. Does that make sense? So she's kind of the canonical one labeled with this word Shentania, meaning old woman. And then in this other text, the Morrigan appears in the guise of a Shentania. Okay, so that's definitely not definitive on its own that the Morrigan is overlapping with the Cailleach, but she's coming in the guise of something very much like the Cailleach. But then you can kind of add to this another text, and that is Ka Moi Rath, however that's pronounced, Rath. And in that text, it says, quote, "There is over his head shrieking a lean, nimble hag, hovering over the points of their weapons and shields. She is the gray-haired Morrigu," unquote. And the word for hag used in this passage is Cailleach, Caillech. So that means that the Morrigu is directly called a lean, nimble Cailleach in this case. So over his head is shrieking a lean, nimble Cailleach. She is the gray-haired Morrigu. Okay, so you have these instances where the Morrigan is kind of called by names, old hag names, equivalent to the Cailleach. Okay, but other places, of course, I would argue they have unique mythos unto themselves, suggesting that they have definition unto themselves and domains that are their own, so that I think it's best to think of them as kind of like a higher god. Cailleach is kind of the higher goddess that the Morrigan is like an emanation daughter of, in that sort of way that we think of these things. Okay, so that's what I would recommend in understanding this, and this starts to make sense even more. Unfortunately, I'm running out of time. I don't know how this happened, But if you look up wisdomlib.com and you look up Danu, the Vedic Danu that we've been talking about, the Vedic Danu is described as, first of all, Vedic Danu is a separate goddess from Kali overall. So I think that the Kalyak has the best parallels to Kali herself. And I go into this in my sort of Celtic, We're the Celts tantric video that I did, a stream. And I go through arguments of how the Kalyak really does have myths that show her kind of equivalent to Kali. And also, I don't mention those streams, but also Ratri, the goddess night, overlaps with Kali in this and overlaps with the Kalyak. Because Ratri, the goddess of night, is called the mother of frost, which is very much what the Kalyak is and what Frau Holle is. Frau Holle causes the snows to come by shaking her bedding or having another woman, goddess, girl, shake the bedding or whatever it may be. And the bedding, the fluff coming down, is the snow. And the Kalyak shakes her cloak, or rather, she dips it in the waters and puts it out over the land, or shakes it in one way or another, and that is the snow, or shakes across the sky. Different versions that I've read, and so she's gives rise to the frost. Of course, I also touched on elsewhere that Lauhi, the Finnish hag Lauhi, she herself births frost from herself, and she's the mother of frost in a direct sense, and she's this sort of primordial hag. It's interesting that Ratri, the goddess of night, and there is plenty actually of esoteric overlap of Ratri as the goddess of darkness and Kali, the dark one. So I think there was a primordial sort of esoteric overlap of night itself and the Kali type goddess potentially, and this role connected to Mother of Frost. But with all of that, the point of saying this is that in the Vedic material you have Kali / Parvati, because Kali emerges from Parvati in some versions, or is esoterically continuous with Parvati. And they are, like I just mentioned, they are esoterically continuous with not even Ratri, maybe to a lesser extent. I don't know. Those are usually sharply separate from Danu. So this is why I emphasize that the Morrigan is much more directly a direct line to Danu and not to Kali herself, right? So if you can keep those separate and appreciate the more direct parallelism of the Morrigan who is Danu with the Vedic Danu as this waters goddess who's a seeress and mother of serpents, mother of queen of phantoms, as her name suggests. If you can appreciate that aspect, you can then appreciate the overlap that also occurs. Okay, this is kind of my rule of thumb. You need to appreciate the distinction first to then appreciate the overlap, rather than just lumping together. So that's kind of what I try to emphasize. And so once you appreciate that the Morrigan parallels Danu more so than Kali, if you go to Wisdom Lib about Danu, the Vedic Danu, which I'll pull up right here. Okay, so Danu, not only is she a goddess who appears in the Vedas and in the Vedic lore that follows after the Rig Veda, she elsewhere appears as the name of a Matrika Shakti. Okay, this is amazing because this is in the more tantric traditions, right? She appears as a Matrika Shakti. Well, the Matrikas are essentially, and of course Shaktis, they're like forms of Kali, essentially. So what I just said was that Danu is separate from Kali. But in tantric tradition, Danu gets treated as basically an emanation of the Matrikas / Shakti. And Shakti is just Kali / Parvati on a higher level. So it is the same continuity. Okay. A lot of names, I know, but hopefully if you're familiar with some of this, you understand that Shakti just means power. It's like the ultimate power, and Kali / Parvati is like the face of that in some way, or a name related to that. Yeah, different forms of the Shakti. And so therefore we have Danu directly called one of the Matrikas, or a Matrika Shakti. And not only that, though, Danu, the Matrika Shakti, is created by Maharudra, so created by Rudra, in order to control the plague of demons created by Andhaka Sura. So Andhaka is an asura, a demon who, I think that's the one who embodies darkness, right? But in any case, Andhaka Asura tried to kidnap Uma, who is Parvati, and was fiercely attacked by Rudra, Maharudra, who shot arrows. When the arrows pierced the body of Andhaka Asura, drops of blood fell to earth, and from those drops, thousands of Andhakas arose. To control this plague of demons, Maharudra created Matrika Shaktis, and these include, as it says, Danu, and ordered them to drink the blood of the demons and drain them dry. So this is fascinating and potentially informative, because there's a separate story where Kali herself appears from Durga as an emanation of Durga, or transformation of Durga, in order to drink the blood of the demon Raktabija. This is in kind of one of the most famous stories of Kali. She is called upon to drink the blood that drops from Raktabija, the demon, because the drops, as they fall to earth, are spawning thousands of Raktabijas. And so Kali sticks out her tongue and drinks all the blood so that the drops can't hit the ground and spawn more demons, and therefore neutralizes Raktabija and defeats him. So you have Danu here repeating exactly one of Kali's most famous myths as one of the Matrika Shaktis who, just repeat that famous pattern of drinking the blood of a demon to control the outflow. So this kind of tells you, I think, that at least in this tradition, they were considering Danu as among the group of emanations who were like forms of Kali, but with their own domain, you could say, a lower emanation, or what have you, a repetition in some sense, connected to like a form of Kali. Okay, so I think that's, you can always argue that, this is just like a late conflation. This is a late conflation. And that's something to be always on guard for and watch out for. And I definitely recommend. I'm always wary about that. Like when I see this in tantric material, I'm like, okay, is this a late conflation where they're just lumping everything together? Or is there, evidence to suggest otherwise, that this is reflecting a way that they did see Danu, that they did see the relationship early on. And if we have a similar thing happening in the Celtic material with the Morrigan versus the Kaliak, where they are kept distinct a lot of the time, they have their own stories, but they have moments where they the Morrigan gets called a Kaliak. The Morrigan gets called a Kaliak in that one passage. In another passage, she gets called a Shentanya, the word for the old woman that is usually the Kaliak. All of that kind of stuff. It does suggest to me that there probably was this same concept of a distinction, but also a continuity. So that would be my argument. And this goes back to, like I said, my belief is that Ernvas is probably a name of the Kaliak, and Ernvas is the mother of the Morrigan, or the Morrigu, the canonical mother, as we saw. Ernvas means iron death or iron slaughter. So if you look at Edil, again, you can look at Ernvas, or ERN. The ERN is just iron. It means iron. And Vas, MAS, means death or slaughter. That is vague on its own. But what's interesting is that in my tantric, my Are the Celts tantric video, I go through the story of Iarnon. Iarnon is just a different, so her name is spelled Iarnan, and Iarn is just a variation spelling of the same exact word as ERN. So ERN equals IARN in this case. And they both mean iron. Okay, it's the same word iron that we've been mentioning. So ironon just means like the iron one or something like that. And ironon, once again, she gets called a Kalyak. She's a hag in the story that I go into in that, which is the caves of Keshkoren, where involving Finn and Gaul. Finn and Gaul encounter Ironon, and sometimes I think she's by herself. I'm not sure about that actually, but she's usually in the story. She's there with two sisters, so it's a trio. May or may not be worth mentioning, but the point is, her name means Ironon, or means iron. She has, the sharp teeth and all this stuff. She incapacitates Finn, has to be defeated by Gaul. And I pointed out that this is the same. This is like the number one best parallel to Kali's mythos, in my opinion. Because especially when you bring in the Welsh parallel of Orddu, Orddu means the very black, and she's a hag that Gwyn and Arthur have to go to the cave of the hag, the very black hag, to extract her blood, to take her blood. When they get to her cave, she incapacitates all the men of Gwyn and Arthur, and then they have to throw a knife essentially from the doorway to finally defeat her and take her blood. To me, that's an echo of a ritual of retrieving the blood of the terrible Kali type goddess in some respect. Okay, because she's the very black. That's what Kali means, and we have this parallel in Ironon, where Ironon incapacitates Finn and his men. Finn is Gwyn. It's the same figure. So it's like the same. It's versions of the same story where Finn or Gwyn go to this hag. She incapacitates their men, and then has to be defeated by someone else, by the other person. Gaul is there who defeats her, and Arthur is there with Finn and with Gwyn in the other version. Okay, but and that all goes back to Kali on a rampage incapacitates Shiva and stands on top of Shiva. Shiva then has to emanate his own terrible form, Bhairava, or the different versions that I go through in that stream are much more specific on how this works. But to simplify the story, in some sense, Bhairava is the one who's the more terrible aspect, who has to defeat, subdue Kali, the black hag, when she's on a rampage, the black hag goddess. Now, if that's the best, I think that, because I believe Gaul is that Bhairava, is that other side of Finn, the terrible Ugra side. And so therefore, Ironon she's called a Kalyak, straightforwardly. So I think she's this black, this iron, these terms like iron and black get sort of repeated in connection with these types of figures. And I think it kind of, iron was referred to as the black metal as well. So this could be another connection, but it's called the Krishna Ayas in Vedic texts. And that is referring to iron at some point, at least when iron appears on the scene. Okay. And so in any case, this suggests that if Ironon is our best Kali parallel, Ernvas, her name means iron slaughter, and she's mysterious. We can also kind of deduce that Ernvas is not the Morrigan herself, because it says her daughter is the Morrigu, meaning like the entirety of the Morrigan is her daughter. So she shouldn't really be the higher Morrigan. She should be whoever is higher than the Morrigan. And I think the only figure that fits this profile is probably the Kalyak, especially with the continuity with Ironon that I just went into. Okay, so I think that's my argument for now, at least. I think this makes a lot of sense of the picture, because when you go to the death of Cuchulainn story, I'm running out of time now, but I really wanted to touch on how people usually conflate the fate goddesses who bring Cuchulainn to break his own taboo, leading to his death. They conflate them with the Morrigan who appears in the same story. I think this is a big error, and other scholars have pointed this out, because at the beginning of the story of the death of Cuchulainn, Cuchulainn is trying to the Morrigan, even though she's been conflicting with him and an antagonist to him, she really, in a sense, loves him. And even, she tries to offer herself to him at one point, which might be more of like a test. She's testing him all the time. Even that might be a test. But ultimately, when he's finally fated, he's coming to go to a battle that she thinks she's a seeress. She can probably see that he's going to die. She tries to destroy his chariot, or she does destroy his chariot in some sense, destroys the wheels of his chariot or something like that. So let me, to try to stop him from going to battle to die. She doesn't want him to die that badly. This implies that she's not trying to kill him. And I think it implies it very strongly and dramatically. And so we can see it right here, the death of Cuchulainn. I'll see, I might run out of time at any moment here, have to leave, but you can see, let's see. On the night before, the Morrigu had broken the chariot, for she liked not Cuchulainn's going to the battle, for she knew that he would not come again to Evin Macha. Then Cuchulainn reproached his horse, saying that he was not wont to deal thus with his master. Okay, so you can see there, she liked it not that he was going to go die. She tried to stop it. She did everything she could. And thereafter, just a couple paragraphs later, Cuchulainn encounters 3 crones, blind of the left eye. Well, why should these be this? People try to conflate these crones with the Morrigan. Why should they actually be the same? They specifically want to kill Cuchulainn. They actually have a backstory of their own and a motive to kill Cuchulainn, because Cuchulainn killed their father and all of their brothers. I can't remember if they had 100 brothers or 27 brothers or something like that. But this is Taliesin. Taliesin is Cuchulainn. Earlier in the Toynbee, he kills Taliesin and all his brothers. And these 3 crones are the sisters of those brothers. They are the daughters of Taliesin. So they are separate figures in the story from the Morrigan entirely. And in the story of the death of Cuchulainn, they are working entirely at cross purposes with the Morrigan. So, and again, other scholars have pointed this out, that maybe we really shouldn't be conflating these figures just because there's sort of an overlap of raven imagery, seeress imagery, crone imagery. It doesn't mean they're exactly the same, because they seem, in the story is telling us that they are different characters who want different things. So then the crones essentially lure Cuchulainn to eat the food that will break his taboo, and that leads to him being weakened and dying. And one of the linchpins of this is that one of the daughters, one of the crones, is named Bav, I believe, at least in one version or something. Okay, Bav is a name of the Morrigan. So my point is that Bav or Bav actually became a generic term for a seeress also. So that it doesn't mean it is necessarily the Bav who is the Morrigan, because if it could have become a generic overlapping term, kind of like different terms we've touched on. There's in the story itself, they are not called the Morrigan and anything like that. So my point is that the hag goddesses, the fate goddesses, they really should be emanations of not the Morrigan, but the Cailleach. And I described how the Cailleach is really the mother of the Morrigan. And yes, it's true that the Cailleach is overlapping, emanating her daughter, the Morrigan, and there's continuity there esoterically. But if the fate goddesses are like a different branch esoterically of the Cailleach, as I go into in my other stream, it would suggest a split, a break, but it would explain the discontinuity between the Morrigan and what she wants and what these fate sisters want and do. And it would explain what's happening in the story much more. That they are related goddesses, very closely related, esoterically speaking, emanations from the same higher Kaliak in a sense, but they're at cross purposes here. And finally, and the last point should be that the three crones who give out this the meat, they seem to be in the place, yes, of the Moirai, the Fates, because the Moirai are the ones who give ephemeral fruits that weaken Typhon. That's the exact mythic parallel of these crones giving food that weakens Cuchulainn, and because Cuchulainn is equivalent of Typhon. So these crones are like the Fates. That's more like continuous with what the Kaliak mythically connects to. But the Morrigan is not the fate goddess. She's not the Fates per se. She's the one who foresees the Fates. So she's the seeress. It's kind of like fate is one thing, but the one who sees the fate is separate. So if you are seeing the fate, you are at a remove from fate itself, from being the power of fate. Okay, so I think that's the split we need to see here. The Morrigan is the seeress. She foresees, and she's, suffers from seeing the future even, but she's at a remove from the fate, and she is much more connected to being the abyssal waters, connected to the abyssal waters in herself. And fate is something a step higher, perhaps, or a different emanation from the higher goddess, if you will, of the Kaliak. And so this is what's playing out in this story, I would argue, is this discontinuity between the seeress, who is connected to fate because she sees it, and the one who controls and doles it out herself, who is the three fate sisters. So you're seeing a complex picture of goddesses who they have their own roles, but yes, they trace back to an overlapping point, and that explains some of the overlap, including the fact that one of them is called the Bav. It's this esoteric this flow, this is overlap. Nothing, it's not perfectly clean, but it's like the Morrigan disagrees with her own higher self, her mother, and she's continuous with her, and it pains her, but she can't control what that higher fate power, that higher fate goddess is bringing about. She can't overcome it. The Morrigan is the one, she can't overcome the power of these fate sisters. They are more powerful than her because she's just the seer of that fate. Okay, so and I would say, and as far as Tavarn, I think Tavarn is much more that higher totality. Tavarn is like the ocean at the higher level. That's continuous with like Vach, Devi, Kali, these higher names. And I think the Morrigan / Danu is one step below that. Still primordial, but much more like the dark side, the darkness that is there right before the land emerges from it and is dried up and defeated. And so she has this power of Maya, magic. She has power over magic and phantoms and connection to all these powerful things, but she's not fate itself, and she's not, she's an aspect of that higher goddess, of course, but she is not the totality unto herself. So she's very, very powerful, but has this more dramatic role unto herself. Okay. All right. I ran out of time. I wish I could continue and keep rambling. And thank you guys for listening today, and have a great one. Please let me know if there are any questions. Bye-bye.